Hello, hello? Can you hear us?
Hello, hello.
Hello?
Hello, hello.
Can you hear?
Can you hear us?
This
see
is
us?
early. This is so early. I don't even have this number on my watch. 10:40 is like, where it doesn't even exist in my life.
That's the time it is in Yugoslavia.
Are we gonna be having a moderator?
Yes, sir. I am your moderator. Welcome to Knoxville, gentlemen.
Were you going to sit in the center?
No, sir. No, sir. I stand over here. I try not to call too much attention to myself.
Good joke.
Thank you so much for all for showing up at this ungodly hour.
We can start off the day with the questions, ladies and gentlemen. Who's got the very first question? Right over here. And then we're going to start a line right over here. Just come over and start the line because it's going to get close.
You're so cute. First of all, Dan, love you. Thank you. Love you both, obviously. So, tell me what you would like to be remembered for.
You know, I'd like to preface all these questions by asking you to direct them to one of us individually, because there's no kind of group answer. So, who are you asking?
I'll ask Michael.
Michael, good. Go for it. I'm gonna take a nap. No, it helps because, you know, we weren't born from the same womb. And
I was in the living room.
I was in the bed womb. So it helps if you address a question to an individual. To Michael, what was your question?
What would you like to be remembered for?
What would I like to be remembered for? Well, that's a loaded question because there's no right answer, and I guess the only answer is nothing. It's for me. I just, you know, from the minute that it dawned on me we were all captured by the finite, I just wanted out. And so I still do. I'm looking for the door. And it's not the ones marked exit, I'll tell you that. From the door marked exit, they come in. And I gotta leave it there. Hey, Hope, you made it. And I think, you know, my mom invented liquid paper, but I don't think she was happy being known for inventing liquid paper. She was an artist in her own mind, and not a very good one. But I think that's what she wanted to do, and I think that's part of how liquid paper came to be. And the reality, if it's real, was that she created a multi-million-dollar international corporation, which was, however you want to take it, was run by men, and a few of her cohorts, women. And it was, the last building she had was the post office building that she bought from the government. It was a beautiful modern building that the post office had to vacate. And she refurbished it in Dallas, Texas, to be the manufacturing center and plant for liquid paper. She took it from doing like 100 bottles an hour to doing like 10,000 bottles a minute. Had a production line made in Germany, wouldn't you know it? And she really just, you know, had just sort of had it. She fell into hard times with her executive team, and she was not a happy woman when she checked out. And she checked out very early. She was, what, 56 or something? You guys remember? She was a young woman, and had tons of money, and I was all set to go, you know, travel around the world and play and so forth. But she wasn't. She was looking for the same door I am. You know, how do you get out of here? And the answer is, I don't know. I've met some people who have, you know, big lights, like Douglas Adams, Bucky Fuller. But it didn't reveal the door. Doesn't tell me where it is. The closest I can get to that is writing, and I can write my way out of a bunch of stuff. But you can, unless you can walk through the door, which I guess is a saying, unless you can walk the walk, you got air. And so I'm wandering, and here I am at however old I am, and you guys remember when I was 7, and when I was 9, and when I was an idiot. Not that I'm not still, and it just changes as you go along, and so I can't say, oh, I hope everybody remembers I did that, because I'm spending more time thinking, gosh, I hope nobody remembers. That's the best answer I can give, and it gets back to nothing. Mickey, I know, wants to be remembered for his furniture.
Actually, that's probably quite true. I actually don't think I have a choice. It's not gonna be up to me what I'm remembered for. It'll be up to you. And I just do what I do, and all my life, I've done this, sang that, acted this, built that, and I don't really think about it, in any sort of intent. I just do what I do and have fun and enjoy what I do. Usually, not all the time. Sometimes it gets burdensome. But what I'll be remembered for won't be up to me. It'll be up to you.
It cannot be a part of me.
Because it's part of you.
Next question.
Forgive me, I'm a little bit nervous. My question is directed at Micky because I recall some article or interview mentioning or referencing the decision to use y'all's legal name into the series and of course the repercussions that resulted from that decision. I was wondering, 50 years on, after seeing all the positive and the negative of that decision, if you had a magic wand to go back, would you still choose for them to use your legal names or to use fictitious names for those characters? And do you think the Monkees would still have the sustainability had that decision been different?
Were you asking?
Micky.
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear that part. That's a really good question. And we've talked about it, and I've thought about it, and I'm not sure that, well, obviously, it's moot right now. I mean, we'll never know. You can't do a controlled experiment trying both, ways. The original script, pilot script, of course, that I still have, had different names. It was Chuck and Bill and Frank and Joey and something. And I do remember there being discussions about whether or not we used our real names or character names. I don't know. Again, what do you think? Do you think it would have made any difference if we had had character names as they do in most television shows? In fact, all of them. I don't know. It's a very good question. There's the argument that because it was our real names, and the producers are the ones who made this decision, not us, because they used our real names, it did create more of a bond with the audience, you could argue. But on the other hand, would anybody have cared if my name was on the show, not Mickey, but Chuck?
I like not Mickey. I think that's a good name.
But I think ultimately, probably, it did make a difference in that our fans at the time, could relate, more personally to each of us, because of those interviews we did, you know, the stuff we did as ourselves, you know, but ultimately we were still playing parts. We were still, you know, playing the parts of this imaginary rock and roll band who wanted to be the Beatles and never made it on the TV show. No, that was a very important part of the brief, the Bible as they call it these days. And it was intentional, I believe. That
I was in the early writers meeting because I thought maybe they had hired me to be a writer. And I could tell about 10 minutes into that meeting a couple of things. First of all, these guys were way faster than I was. And second of all, they had an idea about the way this was going to go. And I remember when somebody threw out, let's use the name of the guys. I don't remember who it was. Let's say it was Tree Silver. Whoever it was, it sort of stopped everything and everybody understood this is a momentous decision. And oh, there they are. And they took it very seriously. I got out of there. I thought, well, I'll see you guys. There's my ride. And it was, I think it was completely in the hands of the writers. And like Mick said, ultimately I ended up on the producer's desk. It was not a decision that we made. You'll find out that most of the questions that you have for us, in fact, we don't have an answer for. I mean, it's just mysterious monkeys, didn't they? That was the title of the thing here.
what do you think? Who asked that question? Yeah. What do you think? Would it have made a difference to you if my name was Chuck instead of Mickey?
I think we would have loved it anyway, but I think it would have had a different feel a little bit. But I think we would have loved it anyway.
There you go.
And
Who knows?
I think in some way, writers and us, we knew we were toying with television creating its own reality. Go ahead, erupt into applause. And television creating its own reality is a real thing. And if you're in front of those cameras and then you watch it on a Monday night, you realize you understand how real it is. I think about that. I watch the news most of the days, and it's amazing to me how much the news creates the world we live in. It's not the other way around. They're not reporting on what they're seeing. They're reporting on what they hope they see. And it was kind of the same way with the monkey. We were watching this thing come alive in front of us. I unpack a little bit of this in my book, Mick has in his books, about just that moment where one understands, oh, this is the real deal, and I really am Michael, and this really is not Mickey, and it just creates more questions than it answers. It did for me.
Well put, yeah. It does create more questions. One of the decisions somebody made along the way, the writers, producers, there was a whole lot of people involved in the Monkees besides, obviously, the four of us. But when they decided in the early days, this is going to be a show about a band, about a rock and roll group, who's struggling for the success. And that was a very profound and important decision they made. Since then, there's been other shows about, bands and kids and stuff, but they're always really good looking and they're already successful. Well, none of us were good looking really except Davey. And we were not successful. We were struggling for that success. And that, I think, is what spoke to all around the world, kids all around the world, who at the time were in their basements and their living rooms and their garages, and they were trying to be successful. And it spoke to that. And I think that had a whole lot to do with the affection and, and the success.
But we digress. My favorite color is blue.
Thank you. Mine is blue too. Look at this. That's why we got this,
Next question.
Hello from Texas.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, Texas.
Hi. Hey, this is for Mickey. Well, you both can, but out of the four of you, which one of you played the most instruments?
Peter. Peter played, he played, piano, guitar, bass, banjo, French horn.
He was a trained musician.
He went to I don't think it was Juilliard, it was
It was a liberal arts school, but the main topic was music, or at least so he told me.
he was the most accomplished, musician, as far as I know, amongst us, in the terms of what you asked, playing all the various instruments.
Question.
Next.
All right, this question is for Mickey. There's been very many variations of the Monkees over the years, but you've always seemed to be a part of it. So I just want to know, have you ever quit the band?
I didn't hear you. I couldn't hear that.
I was asking, have you ever quit the band?
Has Mickey ever quit the band?
Oh. Did I ever quit? No. As a matter of fact, I'm the only one who didn't. Wait a minute.
Slow down.
That's not fair. Also, but I never considered it a band. The Monkees was a television show about a band. And I played a character on that show. I played the wacky drummer.
You played
I
not
was
Mickey.
cast as the wacky drummer. It's like saying, did you ever quit Circus Boy? No, I didn't. The show was canceled and I went on and did other things. But that's always been my approach, my attitude towards it. I was a entertainer, actor, a singer, whatever, playing the part of this wacky drummer on this television show. So to me, it was never, initially, it was never a band. It was, like I mentioned before, it was a television show about a band. Like Glee was a television show about an imaginary glee club in this high school. But they actually could do it all. They could sing and dance and act and do everything, like Fame, let's say, or something like that. And that is what, to me, the Monkees was. It was a television show about this imaginary band that lived in this beach house in Malibu, which was a set at Columbia Studios, which does beg the question of how we could afford a Malibu beach house when we never got any work. But that's what the show was about. And then all of it, then when we went on the road, like Nez famously has said, all of a sudden Pinocchio became a real little boy. And we went out there and played concerts in front of tens of thousands by ourselves. And
What were we thinking?
And there's a CD somebody recorded called Monkees Live in '67. It wasn't recorded to be a CD, I don't think. Somebody just held up a microphone. But it's not bad. It's like, it sounds like this garage band, in front of 20,000 people.
Great question.
They must have had the intent that we were going to eventually go and play. Because when they cast us, you had to be able to sing and play. My audition piece, as most of you probably know, it was Johnny Be Good from Chuck Berry, which I used to do as a cover tune in cover bands. I don't remember, what did you do, like Bo Diddley or something?
No, I did a Beatles song called The Night Before.
What?
Yeah, there you go.
Peter, you know that song?
Peter did Perfectly, probably, or something. Davey did, I'm gonna build a mountain, or something. So they clearly had the intent that if the show went on the air, which was a big if, it nearly didn't sell.
Well, more precisely, it did not sell the first time out. And they all came back and said, oh, it didn't sell.
On the first overnights.
Yeah.
No, not overnights.
Whatever they're called, yeah.
Upfronts. The upfronts, the network upfronts, it didn't sell. The show didn't sell. And Bob went back in, re-edited, Bob Rafelson, and re-edited it and tweaked it, and it very, very nearly did not sell at all.
You may not know this, but the Monkees was not a hit TV show. I mean, we all love it, and I love it, and look at it with great pride and approbation, but it was number 21 nationally. I think it was the highest it ever got. And we are the margins, gents and ladies. We are the remnants. It's amazing that we're all here.
A similar thing happened to Star Trek. Any Star Trek fans? There you go. Star Trek got canceled after 1 year, 2 years, if that. Something. And the fans, the fans were, and back then, gosh, it must have been tough to,
My mother called me in tears. What are you saying, Mom? I said, Mom, you're totally unintelligible. You sound like what Mickey hears at dinner. Are you saying Star Trek got canceled? Mom, it'll be back. I'm living proof of that.
No, Nez is right. The show was not a major big hit show, but it did have a very dedicated following. And it ran for 2 years, only 2 years.
56
But in
episodes.
those days, 2 years was 50-something episodes. These days, with 8 episodes a year, or 6, if 6 or 8 if you're lucky, the equivalent today would have been the Monkees would have been about 5 or 6 years ago.
Next question.
This question is from Mickey. You just had a great story arc on this show, Difficult People. I'd like to know how that came about and what did you enjoy most about it? And Mike, I have the same question for you, but about your cameo on Portlandia. And finally, will we see more of this sort of thing?
And finally, what?
Will we see more of this? Would you do more cameos, more story arcs on regular shows?
Make me an offer. In my case, one of the creators of the show was a fan and came up with this, wacky idea. And I read it and I said, I really have to do this. This is so like left field, out of the blue. And I won't repeat the lines I said, kind of rude, but I watched the show and I accepted the offer. And I'm very proud of that little piece of footage. What about you? How did Portlandia thing come about?
Portlandia was part of a landscape of television, of a television topography. Oh, you're changed into a man. With a nice hat. There you are. Of a television, because I was doing, first thing I took a swing at was something I called a music video, and then, kind of went from there. And then after that it was pop clips, which was a big in TV, and so I was up to my eyeballs in television, and none of it was narrative. None of it was. I actually called Mick up and I said, because he was doing a puppet-driven show. Puppet's hardly the right word. I mean, these are magnificent, beautiful works of art made out of foams that called Spitting Image, and he did it in England, and I loved it. I thought it was beautifully directed and funny and so forth. And I said, you want to do one for television parts, which was my next foray into TV. And so he came over and we worked on it, and it was a lot of fun, but never was there a branch for me necessarily. I was on a direct path out of the Monkees into more and more narrative and TV and books and movies and stuff like that.
Next question. Okay, this is for both of you, and I've got two I wanted to ask, but I'll give you I'll let you guys decide which one. I want to ask one about Justice or about Headquarters. Which would you prefer?
Which album?
No, I mean, which question? I've got a question on Justice or a question on Headquarters. Which would you prefer to answer?
Doesn't matter.
All right, I'll go back to Headquarters. One of the things that I was glad to see when you guys went out in 2011 and 2012 was that you finally played all of your toys, which I think a lot of fans, me especially, consider to be the Missing Monkey single. Were you guys, when you recorded it, you could tell you enjoyed it. Were you guys disappointed, or how disappointed were you when Lester could not make the deal to procure the publishing rights? And do you both feel that all of your toys would have been the single off Headquarters, and it could have been even bigger than I'm a Believer?
All of your toys was Harry Nilsson.
No, it was Bill Martin.
It was Bill Martin, yeah. Yeah, there were two really enlightened minds around us most of the time. One of them was Harry Nilsson, who I thought was just terrific, and the other one was Bill Martin, who was mad as a hatter. And they were wonderful, wonderful, spikes in the drink. But, we didn't really have much to say about the music. Yeah, well, it's true. Yeah, we didn't. And, that I got my first dose of that, like a bucket of cold water, when they came in and said, here's your second album. And that's but I couldn't pick a single if it hit me with a car. I wouldn't have known how to do it. I don't know whether Mickey feels that or not, but I always had an opinion, but I didn't. I couldn't have played.
What was your opinion of that song? That you can remember?
Well, the same thing I had about Bill Martin. I loved him. I mean, he was really a genuine comic genius, comic mind, and he was mad as a hatter.
Yeah, he was, to my mind, he was our Neil Cassidy,
if you will.
in a sense. He was that, I don't know if you know who Neil Cassidy was back in the 50s with Kerouac, and he was the subject of On the Road. He was the guy that nobody knew and nobody heard of, and there was no photographs, but he was that guy that kind of, I don't know how, he just inspired or was...
He was our joie de vivre. He was the esprit of the Monkees.
Yeah, that's
not,
great.
Not one of us could have carried the whole thing on his back. And it's interesting to me that Bill never got any airtime because he was so funny. And he would, we had this room that we went to in the back of the set that we would all sit around and talk and other stuff. And Bill was in there and constantly riffing, constantly saying one thing after another. And that was funny. And if you get a chance, go online and spend time. Look for Sir William Martin. Look for Bill Martin. Look for Bill Martin and the Monkees. Bill introduced me to Harry Nilsson. He was a magic cat. I'm speaking in past tense because he's no longer with us. But he was a magic cat. He was just one of those guys. And I would just sit at his knee at his feet and just say something else, Bill. Say something else. And a lot of what he said ended up driving us along a creative path that I think most of us didn't know we were on. So,
Thank you, gents.
Thank you.
Tony, thank you both for coming, for starters. I appreciate you being here. I'm going to direct my question to Micky for starters. I saw 33 and a third revolutions per monkey for the first time last week. I didn't even know it existed. But
33 third one.
Okay. Okay.
You know it was
So-
aired like 50 years ago.
Right, yeah. What? You didn't just make it? Oh, no. Now, anyway, toward the end of that show, there's a segment where Mike walks in, straps on a Les Paul, starts playing and singing. You sit down at the drum kit, start playing. And Brian Auger is in that show, and Buddy Miles is in that show. And it got me thinking that that was kind of almost a preview of what the Monkees could have been like post-TV show. And I was interested to know what other kinds of collaborations and crossings of paths happened with the Monkees and other artists of that ilk that never got recorded or filmed or otherwise known about.
Well, I don't think anything. Everything we did was recorded and filmed, and you know, we had those episodes where we had guest artists. Nez and Frank Zappa did a bit together, and I got a kid named Tim Buckley to do a tune. I doubt there's anything that we did that was not recorded and filmed. I can't think of anything. But towards that,
Well, there was that poem with Yevgeny Yevdoshenko, who was a Russian Nobel winner.
the 33 and a third. Has anybody ever seen that? 33 and a third? A few. Yeah, 4 people.
It's hard to sit through, we know.
The original intent was very different from how it came out. And that was mostly due to the fact that the musicians union went on strike the week before the special was to be produced by Jack Good and directed by Jack Good, a very famous British television producer-director. And it was supposed to be done at NBC Studios, and the musicians went on strike, so they had to scrap that plan because the studio was shut down, and they moved the production to a film studio, MGM, where it was not under the same auspices as NBC. And it was, to my knowledge, one of the first television productions on videotape ever to be done as a remote. And they literally had to load these 2-inch videotape machines or 3-inch videotape machines onto the back of a flatbed and ride them out to MGM Studios, hook them up with remote cables, because a lot of the show, if you've ever seen it, was done with green screen. You know, the, what do you call it, video, blue screen technology, which at the time in 67, 8, 9, had very seldom, if ever, been done. Certainly not as a remote in the middle of a film studio. So the lighting wasn't, you know, right. The whole thing was very, very difficult to do.
I think I can cast a little bit of light on the atmosphere that the shows took place in. It's important to understand that by the time that we did 33 and a third, we were a pariah. 4 heads of a pariah. We had become this monster that almost everybody in the studio system hated. So I was constantly looking over my shoulder for a hit. and we were not well received at that point. And I had it in my mind that, well, one of the things we can do to redeem ourselves is to play. We'll play live and you'll hear how we play live. And everybody at the studio that I talked to about this, and everybody at the distribution system, which is NBC, that I talked to about this, hated the idea. They said, nobody wants to see you play. And that was, that was new information for me. I'm like, really? And all this time, silly me. So when we walked out there, it was not to, the enraptured praise of the millions. It was 2 or 3 people, and so we did what we did. And it sort of looks like that. I mean, it's not, I don't denigrate it, but I think had we had a bigger bat, we could have knocked it over the wall. But the bat we had was the bat we had.
We have time for one final question.
This question is for Nez. I'm a big fan of the Wichita Train Whistle album. Particularly the song Don't Cry Now. And I was curious, was there any particular reason you never recorded the vocal version of that? And would you consider either recording a vocal version or posting the lyrics somewhere so they don't have to remain forever a mystery?
Well, thank you. No, I haven't really ever thought about doing that. But Wichita Train Whistle was a massive disappointment for me because I got it in my head, well, I like the Monkees music. They don't want me to have anything to do with the music, so I'll just put together a big band and do it. And Shorty Rogers and I hooked up this idea of the Wichita Train Whistle. And I came up with the now genius idea of getting the band drunk. So I had it catered by Jason's bartender, and who came in there and set up this lavish no-host bar for 53 musicians, who when they came in and saw it, their eyes all got wide as saucers. Well, this is going to be a good weekend. And so as you listen to the record, the band gets drunker and drunker and drunker until I was getting more and more dismayed. I was thinking, this is not what I meant. I want to be Henry Mancini. And whoever the angel is that said, you're not Henry Mancini, was silent or perhaps drunk. And so when it started to come together, I said, well, I'll put them together, I'll order them like they are on the show. And that was a terrible mistake because it started off with the drunkest song. And so then years passed, I got all the masters back, and I put it together now, which if you order it from me, it goes from sober to drunk. It's a subtle shade of difference, but it's there.
Kind of like my life. In fact, kind of like a lot of our lives.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have. Please make some noise once again. Micky Dolenz and Mike Nesmith. Don't forget, you can still stop by their table. They're going to be signing all day. We'll be around. 1 o'clock in the photo op is right on the other side of that wall. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, Micky Dolenz, Mike Nesmith.
Yeah, I just
go ahead.
I just didn't want to walk in front of him and have it.
Here are Yuli's and Micky Dolenz.